Good morning, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Topical Talkology.
Good morning.
Good morning.
How are you, Andy?
Well, actually better than you, because you've had the flu, haven't you?
I have.
All right, back to back, actually. So
I think it was the same. It was the same
it's
thing.
The same
it just
one,
drags on.
same strand that's dragged on. Oh well. Well, I can see you're perking up a little bit compared to what you were in the last few days. But anyway, today we are going to talk about equality, and it's a subject we've covered before, but we've all got very strong opinions of this one. So, do you want to get us started on that one?
Well, first of all, they blame equality on the evil capitalism. But actually, we've talked about this before, but the Pareto distribution and de Zola Price, who then looked at it in situations of competitive creativeness, said that you get inequality wherever you get competitive creativeness. So, for instance, if you play a game of Monopoly, at one point, one person is going to have so little they know they're going to lose and they can't possibly win, and one person has so much that they will win and they know it and they can't help winning.
Do you want to actually clarify what the Pareto principle is to those who don't?
The Pareto principle simply means that I think he was a civil engineer in Italy, and he discovered that 80% of the property was owned by 20% of the people, and then he looked around and he found that this distribution occurred pretty much everywhere else in life that you looked at. And then de Zola Price looked at PhDs, and he found that half the people had a PhD, but then those who had more than one PhD were a disproportionately small amount, so it wasn't linear. So again, the 80-20% rule applied there, and in terms of equality with goods and finances, the same principle applies, and you can even look at it in terms of producers in a society. So half of the production in a society is produced by the square root of the number of people. So if there's 100 people in a society, or shall we say 100 people in a company, then half the production comes from 10 of those people. And you can apply the same thing to finances.
Yeah, look, can I jump in there a second just to keep this one a little bit more stimulating, because the Pareto principle is not the most exciting element to be actually discussed, but it comes down to, it's almost like saying that we wear 20% of all the clothes that we actually have, so 80% we don't actually wear.
Good point.
In effect, so we stick to the visual 20%, things like this. So we apply to so many areas of our lives without realising it. And before someone goes in there and actually looks to measure and say, oh, actually that's incorrect, it's a principle, and it's the Pareto principle. It doesn't mean it's an 80-20 exact figure. It's there and thereabouts. It could be 70-30,
90-10.
Yeah, but it's still considered that 80 as the 80-20 rule.
And thank you. And therefore, in terms of, it's not a consequence of capitalism. This is the point. And indeed, studies have been done looking to see how you can redress this huge inequality in haves and have-nots, and they've looked at ultra left wing, they've looked at ultra right wing. Nothing fixes it. The only thing that fixes it is a catastrophe. In other words, where you reset it to ground zero. So, for instance, after a war, after a devastating famine, after a devastating tsunami or earthquake, something catastrophic that resets everything to time zero, ground zero.
And actually, you bring up a very good point, because I have had this argument on many occasions, and particularly when I've been pulled up about it on stage. And I said, if actually everyone went back to the same baseline, let's call it ground zero. All right, if you actually look to the person to the left of you, one of you is smarter. You look to the person to the right of you, one of you is taller. You look at the person behind you, one of you is bigger. So the thing is, there's already an imbalance there, because every person has been created equal in terms of mental toughness, in terms of ability, in terms of aptitude, in terms of tenacity, in terms of even physical characteristics.
That's right. Therefore, it's not equality of outcome. It's equality of opportunity that matters.
So the thing is, as soon as that happens, even when you get to that ground zero and put everyone in the same place, what's eventually going to happen is we're going to make choices that, and it's a series of choices that leads you to where you actually ultimately land. And there'll be some people who will choose to spend the money that they have on a little bit of white powder and put it up their nose. And there'll be other people who will choose to invest that money. There'll be other people who will choose to start a business with that money. There'll be some people who will want to hold on to the stability of that money. So whatever happens, there's going to be, it'll be within weeks. That imbalance will always be there, because the thing is, people who know how to make money will make money wherever they go.
Correct.
All right, and it comes down to that. In terms of equal opportunities, I can't understand what people say to me that go, well, we always have to have equal opportunities. We all have that. You've got the internet available. There's nothing that you can't learn on the internet these days. A 10-year-old can access more highly specialist information and sensitive information than a highly trained specialist could 10 years ago.
So the world tailors its opportunities often to your own abilities.
Absolutely. And the thing is, but you can go and learn. Some of you, and it's not fair. And people are going to need to get over that. Some kids will go to private school and will have more of an advantage. Some parents have taken that sacrifice to be able to send their kids to private school. All right, but that is their choice, and which has a knock-on effect. And you can't actually hold that against them. Now we could go back in history and talk about colonization and the misdeeds that we actually did there, and they would have a strong argument to actually bring that up.
Just going to school and education.
Yeah. Okay. Go on.
Because we did finish last week's podcast on happiness and Norway having free education, and despite very high taxes, and that is true equality of opportunity, which also gives social integration, because Norway they've legalized drugs, haven't they? And what they did is anyone with a drug problem, they socially reintegrate, because they worked out from previous studies, such as drug addicts coming back from Vietnam in America, they worked out that it's social integration that matters, rather than sending people to prison, which socially disintegrates them. And therefore equality, and they looked at men and women, and men and women, as we discussed last week, are fundamentally different on a spectrum. Obviously there's a huge overlap, but we talked about their brains and levels of testosterone, and that on the whole men are interested in things and women are interested in people, and therefore if you give them the same opportunity, they're going to do on the whole different things.
Yeah, and women are forced to, women are almost forced to conform by a few very loud feminists who seem to be dictating the pace on which direction they should, they ought to be going into, rather than whether they actually want to be going in that direction. There was one thing that came up. There was an interesting article last week about the highest paid business owner, and it was a woman. And I think, I don't know, I can't remember how much it was. I've got
240 million.
It was 240 million. I had
previous year.
Because she worked for Bet365. She is the co-owner, and I think it's the CEO of Bet365, which is a gambling company. And it's a gambling company. And what happens is that ultimately they're actually feeding off people's misery. Because actually, but then again, it is also their choice. So some people choose to risk their money by gambling, which is why some people get poorer and poorer, and people do these things out of desperation as well, though.
But you see, it's not limited; it's unrestricted.
It is unrestricted.
And by being unrestricted, they know they're taking advantage of the addicts. They know, and that is unforgivable.
But we're all taking advantage of the addicts.
Sorry?
But everyone's taking advantage of the addicts. The pharmaceutical companies take advantage of ill people who are
that's different.
addicted to medicine.
That's not true. That's not true. You can't say you're taking advantage of. You're providing a service. That's different. But if you're not worsening an illness.
I might be mistaken here, but the thing is, I understood the pharmaceutical industry was in the disease-making business rather than the cure-making business.
Again, that's right.
Otherwise, they wouldn't be so profitable.
Well, you're right. There's a definite cynical avenue to that as well. Like breakfast being the most important meal of the day, and Kellogg's cornflakes is one of the biggest cons of the century. But no, I mean, when someone's ill and you help them, that's providing a service.
Yeah,
Otherwise, doctors don't take advantage of their patients.
No, they do not. Actually, they do provide a solution. But then again, you could actually call alcoholism, or people taking alcohol as a form of medication. Playing the lottery is in effect.
No, they might be self-medicating, but it's not the right way of doing it, because what they do is they're doing it subconsciously without realizing what they're doing, and therefore it's something wrong. So it's not, medicine is something that is the right thing for the condition, although you can of course self-medicate with something that's wrong.
Who says that?
I'll give you another example. Bulimics do it often.
But who says you shouldn't self-medicate?
No,
why? And I'm not disputing, because I think doctors are great. I mean, I'm quite fortunate in that respect as well. But doctors is something I think it was actually Carnegie and Rockefeller that probably created the whole medical infrastructure that it is today in some ways.
There's nothing wrong with self-medication, but a subgroup, a subcategory of self-medication is people doing things without self-awareness, which then continues to worsen their condition.
It does, but they do. But it's still a form of self-medication. People stop depression by taking alcohol. Call it a medicinal approach to it. Doesn't mean it's a healthy solution.
It's an unhealthy self-medication.
Well, is chemotherapy a healthy solution?
The categories are healthy and unhealthy self-medication.
Yeah, but you need to put it into perspective here. Is chemotherapy a healthy solution to actually get better?
It's a necessary evil in a way, isn't it?
Exactly.
But drinking alcohol isn't a necessary evil.
But to the person taking it is.
Well, no, it's because they know no better. Because they started it and then they got caught in it and they became addicted.
We're I think approaching it from two different angles. I'm not saying that alcoholism is right, because it's not. But when you go back to the basics, is the person who's choosing to self-medicate with alcohol, if you want to put it that way, is actually to overcome another pain. It's a form of pain relief, in some ways. It's psychological pain relief.
It depends on whether you're...
Emotional pain relief.
It depends on whether it's harming you. So you're right. I mean, millions and millions of people...
Go back to what I'm saying about chemotherapy. Does chemotherapy actually harm you?
Well, it's carefully metered and supervised with the aim of actually curing you. And, of course, there are millions of people who do have a drink to calm down and relax at the end of the day. And that is, if you want self-medication. But it's not strictly self-medication, because you haven't got a condition that you're treating. But... If the condition you think you're treating is more severe, so you need more alcohol, then you can lose perspective, because the alcohol can then take over and control you.
Of course,
and damage you,
all that medicine
and cause other problems.
That says on the packets, do not actually use any heavy machinery while taking these tablets. That also has an effect on your ability to perform as well, though.
It does, but then that's part of a treatment regimen where everything is carefully considered.
By who?
By you and your treating physician.
Yeah, it's done by doctors, all right, who tell you. And the thing is, we have an element of trust in our doctors that they're going to provide us with the right thing. Yet, many of these pharmaceutical industries who have these people in medical sales, for example, are looking to sell their product.
I couldn't agree more. But I think let's not get too bogged down.
Let's face it. Doctors aren't exactly going around sampling every form of medication out there.
Yeah.
So their diagnosis and their solution to some of these things, in many cases, is all theoretical rather than experiential.
No, but they're the ones who have the experience of actually treating their patients, and they know it works. So, I mean, let's not get too bogged down. The professional treatment of something in order to effect a cure with no symptoms.
We've gone off the whole equality thing.
Exactly.
All right, we've gone off the whole equality.
Going back to the inequality, the article this week talks about the inequality in life expectancy, and since the 80s, it's been getting worse. So now the difference in life expectancy between men of high and low social class is almost 10 years, and of women it's about 8 years, let's say. Imagine that. Imagine that. And
So people who are wealthier live 10 years longer.
that's it.
And what was the data behind that?
It's just looking at the it's